So this is a question I get asked a lot. There's actually two parts to this question, but basically the gal was asking if there was a horse that was chaotic or maybe fearful or whatever, displaying excessive movement while tied, and that people were saying that you should just leave it standing tied until it calmed down on its own, and then that would be teaching it to stand tied. So one of the things that I find that is a total misconception in the horse world that comes back to the foundation in the human's education and the horse's education is the concept of being tied. Most people, or even standing, most people I meet, there is never, I'm going to say, an assessment or an acknowledgement to even recognize if they are teaching containment when they're asking the horse to stand still or be tied, or if they are teaching the horse to mentally and physically be in the same place without carrying defensiveness and tension. And, you know, tying a horse for a lot of folks is let's just find the most solid object there can be and let's tie him up, and he'll either fight himself and quit, or he'll fight himself and he'll exhaust himself and then he'll quit, or whatever it is, rather than saying what are all the skills that this horse would need to be educated on to prepare him to tie so that it was uneventful, meaning not traumatic, he doesn't hurt himself, there's not excessive and unwanted movement. And you know, you can see a lot of videos from the past. I mean, there used to be the big old post with whether you tied the rubber tire to it or all kinds of other apparatuses, and people would just tie the horse and leave them out however long it took, usually hours, often days, until the horse quit moving. And after that, yeah, the horse would often stand still. But again, we're coming back to, are we teaching tolerance and containment, or are we teaching life skills? And for me, it's about teaching life skills so that I have a mentally present, adaptable, thinking horse that is willing to accept whatever communication I'm offering without it triggering fear or avoidance or flee or all these sort of things. So how does that tie into tying, literally? First, we have to recognize, how does this horse even feel about pressure? For most folks, they are never addressing if the horse is okay with pressure or not, if he is constantly carrying tension, a physical brace, which is reflecting his mental defensiveness or anticipation or avoidance. And so just by starting there and recognizing that, like, if we have a horse who's heavy on the lead rope and dragging us when we're leading and pushing through pressure just when we're on the ground, that horse is already telling you that if push comes to shove, that is the horse who will pull back or rear up or bounce off of things when he gets chaotic, and then he feels, I'm going to say, physically restricted because he's tied to a solid object. Again, all of that unnecessary chaos, fearful experience, or trauma could be completely avoided if we prepare the horse in educating him to not be defensive towards physical pressure. Another aspect of this is, I'm going to say, the flailing horse. So most people who see a horse that's offering excessive movement is responding from their own, I'm going to say, knee-jerk emotional reaction. How does it make the human feel? I don't like that that horse is standing tied. That's annoying that he's flailing about, or he's pawing, or he's screaming to his buddy. So it's all about these human emotions and how the human feels, rather than recognizing the horse has only so many ways to mentally work through something. And if in his education during human interactions, he's never been given the opportunity to think, to learn, to search, to try, to let things go, to become adaptable, why would we suddenly expect that the horse had the skills when he's left flailing and chaotic and mentally anticipative and probably physically defensive towards the pressure, that he's suddenly going to be able to have the skills to work through something? And again, this is one of those coming back to the foundation and how you're educating and preparing your horse. Most people with the young horse are challenging the horse to get it right. They use a whole lot of repetition. There's not a whole lot of mental engagement. There's not a whole lot of adaptability. It's all about obedience and compliance. And so the concept of, like, leaving the horse flailing when he doesn't have the skills to think through things, when he's defensive towards pressure, and then just hoping that he'll figure out what to do, maybe that horse does eventually quit moving and we go, see, we taught him a lesson. The problem is, what we don't recognize is that we are teaching that horse containment. We are teaching that horse defensiveness. So let's say you have the horse who was flailing. It took 3 days. Now he stands quiet, meaning he's not moving, which really means he's not triggering the human emotion to judge him. It's not really that he's okay. He's just learned to stop. But the minute that we untie him and we go to take him to go do something else, what many people aren't recognizing is that all that containment and that chaos that we first saw is still in him, which means the next thing that we go to ask of him, it is going to filter the quality of our interaction. So if we never addressed how he was defensive towards physical pressure, and now he's learned to contain himself by not moving, but we go to ask something else that's triggering, guess what happens to that movement? All of a sudden you see this big dramatic responses or this chaos come back up again, and people go, why was he standing fine? Because again, the fine is according to the human emotion. It's not that the horse was actually okay, and that we're not recognizing that all that containment, when we didn't help that horse mentally work through something and physically let go of tension, that each thing we ask of him, that containment will come out in unwanted excessive behaviors, and then we critique him for that. So now he learns to contain for the next thing, and you can see how this vicious cycle quickly escalates to where every single interaction with the human is teaching the horse more and more containment and defensiveness. And so this is where, again, you know, so much of the young horse's education, where they don't know something but they're trying it out, and maybe the first 1 or 2 times they sort of can seem reasonable, but then it keeps escalating, and then it seems like the horse is less and less willing, or it takes more and more for him to get to that quiet state, which is not really quiet, it's just lack of movement. A horse can stand still and carry a huge amount of tension, carry a huge amount of anticipation. So again, you have to step back and go, tying is the outcome. It's not the lesson. It's what are all the tools that we're educating the horse with to have a horse who's mentally soft and adaptable when he's standing tied, so that when we untie him and we go to ride off and go do something else, we don't have all of this contained chaos that comes pouring out. And again, this comes back to human priorities. Most people are going through kind of a list of patterned responses they're looking for in the horse, and most of the demands that humans ask of horses, they have not prepared the horse for to do successfully. So basically they're challenging the horse to get it right, and then they're also at the same time not recognizing that every single interaction is teaching that horse to be defensive, fearful, avoidant, and fleeing at any opportunity they get. And so that's where you'll see a lot of these horses where they're young and maybe they can be, I'm going to say, manhandled, literally coerced into compliance, and then you come back and the 2- and 3-year-old that seemed fine and learned all these things, you go back and look at them at 4 years old and 5 years old, and all of a sudden you see a very different horse, and people go, what happened? It seemed like they were fine when they were first learning. And they're not recognizing that once that horse gets that confidence, or it's been proven to him enough times about the human experience is going to leave him flailing, that horse is taking over sooner and sooner in the interaction, creating more and more, I'm going to say, dramatic, dangerous, unreasonable responses. So most of everything that I work with in these troubled, traumatized, fearful, reactive, dangerous horses, it's all from the mentality of, we're just going to let that horse sort it out. He ought to know better. We're going to let him fight himself. All of this ego-based interaction with the horse, rather than humans having any empathy to go, what if I gave that horse a quality education so he could be successful in everything that I ask of him? We might see a big difference in the horses that we're producing today. Just my thoughts.